Now that our quilt sandwich is put together, we need to start quilting it. One of the ways that I like to quilt is using masking tape or painter's tape, or you could use artist tape. I have artist tape here, but you could use masking tape. And to get started, I like to create a line, and then I like to keep continuing with lines so that I can keep it straight and it doesn't get wonky on me. And one way to do that is to use the edge of your quilt top. So you'll see here, I have the edge of my quilt top, it's pretty straight, and I'm going to go 2 inches in, and I'm going to probably use 2 inches as we continue taping this out. But you just put your 2-inch line on the edge of your quilt. And then you take your tape, and I like to pull off at least enough that I can have a little bit of wiggle room. And you want to make sure your tape goes off of each edge. And then you're just going to put the tape right up against the edge of your ruler, making sure you're pretty straight. There we go. And let's just give this a little double check here, make sure we're still at 2 inches. Man, that looks good. Oh, we're a little off there, so we'll move this up a little bit. Bingo. Perfect. So press that down, and you're going to be using that as your quilting line, and then just repeat that. So 2 inches. This time we're going to be following the edge of the tape, and the edge away from you is what you want to follow. And that'll, depending on what width of tape you use, that'll give you various lines, but the quilting is super subjective. You can do whatever you'd like to do. On a project like this that has a lot of angles and a lot of details within the piecing, I like to keep the quilting pretty simple. So again, we're just going to pull out a strip of tape. Okay, butt it up against our ruler. Bloop. Okay, let's make sure we're 2 inches down here. Oh, that looks great. 2 inches there, we're good to go. Okay, you're going to just keep going. Make sure we're at 2 inches. Looks pretty good. We're at 2 inches, that looks good. Even if your quilting lines are a little bit wonky, that's okay. It gives it that handmade feel. It doesn't have to be super perfect, as long as you're happy with it. Okay, and our last one. I also don't put tape right on the edge of my quilt top because I want to leave a little bit of room for when I add the binding, that I don't have any weird stitches following into the binding seams. All right, now we're going to quilt this. So at our machine, I've added my walking foot, and most machines come with a walking foot. If not, there's the option to purchase it. So I've added the walking foot. I'm leaving my white thread in here because I feel like white thread matches this quilt pretty well. You could add a pop color if you wanted. You could add pink, or you could add the turquoise. It's totally up to you, but I'm going to keep the white in there. I've changed my stitch length to 4. Depends on what you want to do. You can keep it, say, 3 to 4. I wouldn't go anything over 4 because then it's sort of like a basting stitch. And then you just pick a line and you start quilting. And usually I work from the one side or the other. It doesn't really matter. And all we're going to do is follow our tape. And we're going to line it up to the edge of our walking foot. Sometimes stop and shift a little bit. Okay, when you get to the end and you sew off, you're going to pick it up and do a new line. And again, we're just following one side of the tape. If you don't have a walking foot and you're using your regular foot, you're probably going to get some puckering. The walking foot helps balance all of the layers together. It helps grab them together. Your feed dog and the walking foot, they sort of work together. They're like buddies in that sense. Your regular foot is going to really not do a great job quilting. You could also send your quilts out to your local long arm quilter. But mini quilts are so fun to quilt at home, and you're finishing it from start to finish. Okay, now we've quilted with our regular lines. We followed one set of lines. Now you can go back in and add some additional lines. So I'll follow the opposite side of the tape now. All right, so we've quilted our quilt top. Now we have to remove our tape lines. What I like to do is I like to start in the center and pull it and then just take our tape away. And this prevents the batting from getting sticky and crazy and pulling like it is there. It just won't pull it on top of your quilt. All right, there's our quilt top. So now we have to trim it and get it ready for our binding. And because our quilt top was pretty straight before, we're just going to simply follow the lines of our quilt top to trim this away. So line that up, give it a good cut. Rotate. And you can kind of check your straightness now. If your quilt top is straight, you can kind of line up your cut edges on your cutting mat to see if you're in a pretty good place in terms of it being straight or being wonky, and this actually looks pretty good. You also want to make sure when you're trimming that you don't cut off your 1/4 inch seam allowance from your flying geese points or ends, and you can kind of see them here and here. This is enough room that when we fold over the binding, you won't miss these points, which will be great. So just keep that in mind when you're trimming. Okay, and the last one, let's see, we're still pretty straight and square. Oh yeah, that looks really good. And sometimes I give it a check on the back too, just to make sure there's no, loose threads or any sort of puckering or anything like that. And this actually looks really good. Yeah, this looks great. So now we're going to add our binding.